In 2012, there was a dramatic increase in UFO activity. Not only that, but combined with it were objects known as bolides coming into our atmosphere and creating loud sonic booms in Northern California that was actually heard all the way over in Nevada. The alien abduction phenomenon. And I know the moment I say that, some of you start squirming in your seat. But what if it's real? Could it be supernatural? What is reality? Could all of this be a digital simulation?
We now know that we are within a digital simulation.
Were the Nephilim real, or were they the product of an overactive imagination by some writer thousands of years ago? We're going to go to Rock Wall and look for evidence that may, in fact, prove that the giants once roamed North America.
Defense Secretary Panetta believes there is strong likelihood Israel will strike Iran in April, May, or June.
What's happening in Israel right now? We're going to sit down for an exclusive interview with Jonathan Daniels, who is the senior advisor to the Knesset, and get the inside scoop. Howard Storm died and went to hell. What happened to him next?
There is another reality much higher and more intense than what we call real.
We'll sit down with Dr. Jeffrey Long, who has interviewed over 3,000 people with what is known as a near-death experience.
He has an understanding of the mark of the beast I have never heard before, and it rings true. I think it's historic what you're going to share. Will you do that right now?
I'd love to. Thank you for allowing me to do this. We see in Matthew 24, Yeshua states something, as in the days of Noah, so it will be when the Son of Man returns. Alluded to that before. What differentiates those days are the presence of the fallen angels. But there's also some other dynamics in that passage which we overlook. One of them in particular is the length of lifespan. 5, 6, 7, 900 years old people lived, and I believe that's literal. They lived to 900 years or older, okay? Hold that thought, then jump over to the book of Revelation. It says, and we all get this one, that anyone who takes this mark will not be able to buy, sell, or trade. That's an easy one, right? But then we find out that anyone who takes this mark, whatever this thing is, grievous sores will appear over the body. Then we find out in the book of Revelation also, anyone who takes the mark is immediately thrown into the lake of fire. There's no grace, there's no mercy. It's just, you've got the mark, bam, you're in a lake of fire. Not my words, those are the words of Yeshua, and those are in the book of Revelation. A little further on we read something which is not necessarily tied into the mark of the beast, but here's the deal. It says that in those days, the days of the mark, men and women will seek death and not find it. How can that possibly be? I've held the chip from Dr. Lear in my hand. I've asked him point blank, what is this thing doing? It's changing the DNA. This thing, and this is how they're going to do it.
This is the chip that people that go into flying saucers have the surgery.
These are the prototypes.
By the way, did this doctor find that these people were loonies?
No, not at all. All these people that have been abducted, most of them, I would say well over 90%, do not want any notoriety. In fact, they seek anonymity. They're not interested in any type of publicity. They just want the thing out.
Why doesn't the U.S. reveal all the information they have on flying saucers? Other nations have done it.
Well, the other nations have done it. Greece, the United Kingdom, France, Belgium, Germany, Japan, Mexico, Brazil. They've all released, I should say, what were at one time top secret documents. We don't do it, and I think the reason is simply this. They fear some sort of a backlash, religious backlash. What happens if people all of a sudden find out that maybe the God we've all believed in isn't? This is what I call, said, the coming great deception. And I believe it's been orchestrated for thousands of years.
Let's go back to this changing the DNA.
Okay.
Why would someone want a chip inside of them?
Here's the scenario. Let's say there's a war, upcoming war in the Middle East, and we see some sort of a nuclear holocaust. Remember, this is just a scenario, okay? So we see a nuclear event in the Middle East, perhaps in this country, and all of a sudden, mile-wide UFOs begin to manifest, begin to appear all over this planet. How is that going to affect everyone? But they'll come with two things. They'll come with a free energy source, and they will come with a chip, and this goes right back into what Matthew 24 states. They will come with this implant, which when you take it, will bring you into, as a member of the New World Order, okay? And when they scan this thing, not only will have its medical records, but it will change and correct your DNA. That's what we'll be told.
So
correct
in other
your
words,
DNA.
you'll live longer, I
You'll
guess.
live to 500 years disease-free.
Ooh.
All this.
So who's going to say no? Only
That's my point.
someone that
Exactly.
knows the Lord.
Exactly.
Only. And you can see why they'd be enemies of the,
Absolutely.
of the
We'd
world.
be looked at as Neanderthals. How can you possibly believe in this ridiculous mythos of a Judeo-Christian God? Why not just take this mark and live disease-free for 500 years? It sounds like a great deal. And I've held it in my hand, and this is what I think it's coming, and it's the only thing which fulfills all that criteria which we just spoke about that's found in the book of Revelation.
And as far as timing, isn't it interesting in this whole scenario of what we see shaping up right now of the nations coming against Israel
sure.
is on the horizon with Obama's name in the secret code? It shows you how soon it'll be that the Messiah is going to return.
An increase in wars and rumors of wars, mass flooding, spontaneous outbursts of Arab unrest, increase of earthquakes, tsunamis and volcano activity, unexplained sinkholes, massive spontaneous bird and fish deaths, increased sightings of UFOs, claims of alien abductions, Torah code prophecies that predict what's happening in the news today. Are all these a wake-up call from God warning us of the events about to take place on planet Earth?
strange and mysterious lights hovering above East El Paso tonight. It looked like a UFO.
I pray, oh Yahweh, that you send a sighting.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
These are genuine UFOs in the sense that no one's ever been able to explain what they are, but they happen. They're not faked.
I never, ever in a million years would have believed in UFOs if I'd not seen it with my own eyes.
Question number 1. What is your opinion of these lights in the sky, or UFOs?
Why is it that Belgium, Mexico, the UK have recently released what were at one time top secret classified documents to the public, discussing and talking and revealing the presence of so-called extraterrestrial objects in our airspace?
75, Sirius is performing quite well.
If we only had 1 or 2 sightings per year, I wouldn't be talking about this. But I'll give you an example. In 1950, the year I was born, there was 1 sighting reported in the month of December. Fast forward to 2008, and we now have over 350 sightings all over the world. Can we at least agree that we may differ as to what is the cause of the phenomena? We can agree that UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away. We were driving home, minding our own business, certainly not looking for UFOs. My wife was driving, I'm in the passenger seat. She looks up and she goes, "Wow, what's that?" I go, "What?" She goes, "There." I look up and sure enough, through the windshield, this large, very powerful light. First I thought it was an airplane coming at us, because when a plane comes right at you, you see that headlight, and it's very easily mistaken for an unidentified flying object. And this thing didn't move. And my wife had to take her eyes off it, but she was driving. But I kept my eyes trained on it, and I began to notice that there were no blinking lights, that the thing moved. Well, after watching it for about a minute, a second light appears and slowly descends into the main light, and then the main light disintegrates in concentric circles. Well, that is something that is anomalous. I think we can agree on that. Was it a craft from another dimension or another solar system or galaxy? I have no idea. I can't say what it was. All I can tell you that it was an anomalous light. This kind of sighting has been reported for decades now all across the globe. We're also seeing what I would consider nuts and bolts craft, and I realize there are people who disagree with this particular theory or concept or position, but I believe that these craft are real. They are made in another dimension, and they are used to travel between this dimension and or this dimension and the second heaven, or this other dimension that these entities really reside in. Some of these craft are enormous. For instance, in 2007 over the English Channel, mile-wide craft were seen by 2 different pilots, as well as that same craft being shown on radars. Look, if it was 1 or 2 sightings per month, we wouldn't be discussing this, but it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds per month. And now when we look at the whole scope of ufology and realizing that this phenomena is not going away, it's time to sort of cast off the shackles of ridicule and fear and examine this thing head on and decide what paradigm works the best to explain the phenomenon.
Question number 2. What factual proof is there of UFOs?
People are always going, where's the hardcore evidence? Where's the facts behind the whole ufology? Well, some of this is really being obfuscated and deliberately obfuscated by the governments of the world. We know that certain countries like Mexico, France, Japan, Brazil, the UK, and Belgium, all have released what were at one time classified documents and now released that to the public, stating that this stuff is real.
Question number 3. Can you give an example?
Edgar Mitchell, a former Apollo astronaut, went on the record on Kerrang radio. And after he sort of announced it on Kerrang radio several years back, I saw him again on the Fox News channel with Sean Hannity on a sit-down one-on-one. And Edgar Mitchell's basically stating, look, Roswell was real. There was a crash and bodies that were recovered from Roswell, and our government covered it up.
yes, there's not much question at all. But there's life throughout the universe. We're not alone in the universe at all.
You're convinced that we're not alone in the universe?
Oh, I know for sure we're not alone in the universe. And I happen to be privileged enough to have be in on the fact that we have been visited on this planet. And the UFO phenomenon is real, although it's been covered up by our governments for quite a long time. It is a real phenomenon. And there's quite a few of us that it's been well covered up by all of our governments for the last 60 years or so. But slowly it's leaked out, and some of us are privileged to have been briefed on some of it. But I've also been in military circles and intelligence circles that knows beneath the surface of what has been public knowledge that, yes, we have been visited.
He believes that, like I do, that there is a cover-up. We just have a discrepancy in our world's view as to what's behind the phenomena. Again, he's extraterrestrial, I'm interdimensional, and specifically the fallen ones, fallen angels, which we read about back in Genesis 6, once again manifesting on the earth. So there is evidence. There's plenty of evidence. We've got the witnesses, hundreds, thousands of witnesses who have come on the record.
Question number 4. Are people interacting with UFOs now?
There's a guy in Vegas. His name is Prophet Yahweh. I've actually interviewed him. And his big claim to fame is one particular time he was able to summon a light in the sky, a craft, a UFO.
We met up with Prophet Yahweh, seer of Yahweh, at Doolittle Park off Lake Mead. We picked the day, we picked the time, and we picked the location. So we took him up on his offer, and we scanned the skies. Nothing but a few clouds. When the prophet started praying for a sighting, I wasn't exactly convinced.
I pray, oh Yahweh, that you send a sighting so that they know that I am not mentally ill. I am not a false prophet, like those who seek to kill me say I am.
I see something straight up.
Oh, brother, look at it. There it is.
You can barely see it, a white speck. Then another sighting.
There it is. I got it.
Photojournalist Jonathan Hawkins locks in on it. Let's take a closer look here. It's an orange sphere that appeared out of nowhere. I call the boss with an unexpected change in my story. I could see it clear as day. In fact, it's bright.
I can't believe this.
It's moving pretty fast.
It's going to Nellis Air Force Base. It wants to be seen.
We called Nellis to see what these things might be. Guess what? They didn't call us back. But this thing started coming back toward us.
It's coming toward us now, I think.
What?
See, it's coming up toward us.
Whoa, man! Oh, hallelujah!
Then, a few seconds later, it disappeared.
It's going back up in space.
Prophet Yahweh isn't concerned. He says it'll be back.
And the camera people were just stunned. They were shocked. They couldn't believe it. This, of course, made national, international news and put Prophet Yahweh on the map. Just recently, there was an article, and I love the way they released this stuff after everyone's dead and there's no way to vet the story. Talked about Churchill and Eisenhower, and apparently Churchill knew of an encounter with a disc and a plane and put the kibosh on it, and both he and Eisenhower got together and said, nope, can't let this story go out. It's going to cause mass panic in the population, and it will make people leave or lose their religious beliefs. And so, you know, this happens decades after the fact. There's no way to call up Churchill or Eisenhower and ask them to vet the story. They're dead, as most of the witnesses are dead. It's one of those stories that comes out from time to time that hints at a deliberate obfuscation of the facts, not only by our government, but certainly the UK and other governments of the world.
Question number 5. What is going on at ESETI Ranch?
We know that another dimension may exist. We know this from string theory, from quantum physics. We know that from Einstein's equation that nothing can actually approach the speed of light. What happens after that? Jane, what did you see at the ESETI Ranch?
A UFO highway. Some were huge, some were small, some were green lights, some were red lights, some were yellow lights. I also saw fairies. Fairies are real. People, look at cute fairies in books and whatnot, and they are malevolent. The biggest one I saw was like 12 inches. The noise was unbelievable from these little things. I have some pictures that are so clear you can almost see their toes.
Question number 6. What are orbs?
What we're seeing up in East City Ranch, and certainly other places, people are seeing these orbs. It's a global phenomenon. The question is, what are these orbs? And what is the source behind these orbs? And I find it very troubling that certain circles are embracing these orbs as something that's benevolent. They're in crop circles, above crop circles. It's a global phenomenon. People see them in the sky. Jaime Maussan's photograph of the Mexican UFO flap that happened in Mexico, where hundreds of these orbs are seen in the sky. They appear all over. It's a global phenomenon. In the United States, people see and record orbs. What are they? We're living in the age of deception. We can be so easily deceived. These orbs appear as balls of light. It's a global phenomenon. When the orbs come in, they'll come as different colors. They appear and disappear. They kind of flit in and out of dimensions, as it were. First they're there, then they're not there. Sometimes we see from these very bright orbs in daylight, very large orbs, we see other orbs coming and emanating from them, which then come back into them. Very, very bizarre, strange phenomena. What we need to understand and come to grips with is just because I have a supernatural experience, just because I see orbs or something manifests like a UFO, or an entity begins to communicate with me telepathically, that doesn't mean it's a good thing. And it certainly doesn't mean we should embrace it. In my research, which has been going on for basically 30 years, I have discovered that people who have experienced this type of supernatural manifestation, whether it's telepathic communication by so-called extraterrestrial entities or the manifestation of orbs, there's always a doorway open into the supernatural. They have engaged in some sort of illicit behavior. You can only test the spirit or spirits, what's coming at you, from a standpoint of you haven't opened yourself up by illicit means to some sort of communication from interdimensional beings. Let me say that again a little simpler, perhaps. If we engage in necromancy, we've already crossed the line. There's no way to test the spirits at that point, in my opinion. However, if we have an experience, let's say, we're not engaged in mediumship or necromancy or fortune teller or Ouija boards or familiar spirits or talking of the dead, any of this stuff. We're not engaged. We're just walking along, and we have a vision, let's say. At that point, we can test a vision. Or if a spirit manifests and appears in the room, at that point, it's very easy to test the spirits. And the Guidebook of the Supernatural tells us and admonishes us to test the spirits, and there are certain ways in which we can do that.
Question number 7. What does the Guidebook of the Supernatural say about these things?
The Guidebook is rife with examples of the supernatural manifesting with mankind. And it also warns us of and gives us examples of how to engage, how to disengage, how not to engage, how to let's say fight against some of these adversaries which may come up against us. Yeah, the Guidebook is chock full of examples of this kind of fallen angels or even the good angels engaging us. The difference between them, when the fallen ones manifest, okay, it's always fear. It's always a fear-based deal, always fear-based, and it's also sometimes on the other hand that we hear about the fallen ones can appear as angels of light. So the angle here is deception, and this is why just because something may appear benevolent, it might not be.
Question number 8. Why do people feel the phenomena is benevolent?
People today have no paradigm, for the most part, on how to deal with anything supernatural. And so when they are pressed with it, when it comes into their realm of reality, they have nothing to grasp, nothing to hold on to. No paradigm in which to embrace this, for the most part. Oftentimes, people will look at the phenomena and just embrace it, just let it in. Just believe that, oh, it must be benevolent. And nothing, in my opinion, nothing is more dangerous than that. Look, we've got shows like Ghostbusters that are on. With all due respect to those guys, they're playing with fire. Now, they're protected on some level, but at some point in time, and who knows when that's going to be, they're going to cross the line and something very negative may happen. They're dealing with entities that are extremely powerful and malicious, malevolent, evil entities. And this is the problem. Unless a person knows how to test the spirits, knows what they're up against, and understands and realizes that our weapons in which we engage these entities are not carnal. What I mean by that, they're not guns and knives and fists and karate and all this kind of stuff. Our weapons must be of a spiritual nature.
Question number 9. What other phenomena is going on?
There's different aspects of the phenomenon. Not only do we have UFO sightings appearing all over the world, but we've got cattle mutilations, human mutilations, crop circles, so-called abductions, the so-called breeding program, and alien implants. Now I realize, if you have never heard or traveled in those subjects before, that can be like, you're kidding me. And yet just a modicum of research will show that the phenomena is real, burgeoning, and not going away. Let's take cattle mutilations. Cattle mutilations have been going on in different parts of the world literally for decades. Specifically, if we go to the Southwest in the United States, New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, we see cattle mutilations that go back literally 30, 40 years. Law enforcement has yet to bring one person, to charge one person with a crime. There's a MUFON investigator, his name is Chuck Zukowski. What he has discovered is the cattle, once again, are taken. Different parts of them are excised, removed from the animal with surgical precision. There's no blood left in the cattle or the particular carcass. They're usually dropped in the middle of a field, no footprints. While that might sound certainly bizarre, what we do have is the animals themselves, the carcasses, the remains. And we also have certain anomalies around the animal. We have where sometimes the grass in the area right around the animal won't grow the same way the other indigenous plants would be growing just a few feet away. We get spikes in radioactivity. We'll get spikes in electromagnetic frequencies.
It's really pegging here. If this was ghost hunters, I'd say that there was a spirit in there. So we're getting electromagnetic field coming from this area. Is there a tag in the air? See if it's getting off the radio wave.
Whatever's going on is extremely bizarre. Again, no blood. Tongues are taken, ears, eyes, the jaws are stripped down of flesh. Sex organs are cored out. Anuses are cored out. Udders are stripped and taken. It's incredibly grisly and horrific. The bottom line is this. With all this going on, why dump it back into the rancher's field? Why would anyone do that? Of course, it's deliberate because what it creates is a climate of fear. A man living way out in the country with his family decides to go deer hunting, and he tells his wife he's going to sort of scope out the area, hops on his ATV and says, look, I'll be gone for a couple hours. A couple more hours go by and she finally calls search and rescue. They find the ATV rather quickly. It's where he said he was going, on top of this hill. What's bizarre is no signs of a struggle, no footprints near the ATV. It's been like he's just vanished in the thin air. What they do find is his shoe high up in a tree about 50 feet away. How did his shoe get there? 36 hours later, they find his naked body concealed in a thicket near the house. It's been drained of blood. He's like this, with his mouth open and like that. He's obviously terrorized. Next to him is a dead rattlesnake. There's no blood in the dead rattlesnake. The body was removed without a coroner being present. There's the first thing. The second thing is the family is not allowed to view the body. 2 weeks later, the body is returned to the family in a welded steel casket. Cause of death, cocaine overdose. The family, was absolutely taken aback by this because they knew the father, the husband, and there was no drugs involved. So something is going on. Some agency deliberately obfuscated the information, not only from the family, but from investigators who were trying to find out what really happened. And so I believe that some of this is really very much repressed. But we do have 2 cases, the one in Brazil, graphic photograph and an autopsy report, and the one in Pennsylvania. We need to differentiate between orbs and UFOs. Now, this is just a theory. An orb is not a UFO. I mean, it's unidentified. We don't know what it is. But in the classic sense of nuts and bolts, orbs seem to be more ethereal. They seem to be orbs of light and light only. They're not manifesting as nuts and bolts hardware like we have in the classic silver discs that are seen, or classic craft that fly by jets like at 10,000 or 20,000 miles an hour. It's a whole different deal. Orbs are different. When Prophet Yahweh summoned that UFO, I believe it was not a craft. I believe it was an orb. There's a difference there. When we showed photographs of orbs at Isetti Ranch, these are not UFOs. I mean, in the sense of classical dish-shaped craft, these are orbs that are floating by. When we showed you different pictures of men and women, and there's orbs around them, something is manifesting, isn't it? But it's not nuts and bolts craft. Something is manifesting, perhaps from another dimension. There are those who would say, well, there's something, dirty lenses in the camera or whatever. It's not what we're looking at here. Certainly the Isetti footage would show that, Prophet Yahweh. Obviously, something is manifesting. And so again, I would point to the interdimensional hypothesis as the paradigm that best suits what we're looking at. They flit in and out between this dimension and another dimension. And this is why it's important for us to differentiate between orbs and craft. When that pilot in 2007, 2 pilots in the English Channel and on radar, and they see a craft which is a mile wide.
The only person who saw this phenomenon, what were you? There were some passengers who saw it, and also another pilot.
Yes.
Simultaneously?
Any object from 50 miles away must have been fairly enormous.
What about a mile long?
It's possible, yeah.
Did it move at all?
It probably didn't move, but I had the great opportunity the other day from Jersey Air Traffic Control of visiting their radar room, and some interesting traces, let's put it that way, from the radar indicate that there's a possibility that they did pick up on, from both Guernsey and Jersey radar, traces, spurious traces they call, for around about 55 minutes.
How long did you see it for?
I saw it in total for 12 minutes.
When Ricky Soros in Stevensville, Texas, looks up and sees a craft.
This thing, it was above me about 300 foot. You know, the funny thing about it was flat, and I would have expected it to take off at an angle like this, but it didn't. And I was actually watching underneath, and when it took off so fast, if I would have blinked, I would have thought it vanished, but I had my eyes on it, and I know it took off flat at a 45-degree angle. These are not orbs. This is hardcore craft, and it's used to flit between one dimension and the other. And we also got a preponderance of physical evidence with the craft. We've got landing sites where there's pods in the ground. We've got spikes in radioactivity, spikes in electromagnetic field around certain areas where these craft have come down. And then we've got tens of thousands of witnesses who have literally seen cigar-shaped, triangle, pyramidal, and of course the classic silver disc. What's really interesting is that this phenomena is showing up not only in television and movies and books and novels and popular culture and video games. You pick up a music magazine and all of a sudden you realize that, oh my gosh, they're talking about orbs. They're talking about a psychic or supernatural phenomena. It talks about there were 10 to 12 grown men who experienced these orbs coming into the rooms or whatever, and they were absolutely terrified. The classic abduction scenario is simply this. You're laying in bed with your husband or wife, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You awaken out of a sound sleep. And the first thing you realize and you're aware of is that you're paralyzed and you can't move. The second is you're aware of a presence in the room. Somebody or something is in the room. You start to look around with your eyes and you catch in your peripheral vision these beings which are about 3 to 4 foot tall. You awaken, they're there,
The next thing you realize is you're being levitated off the bed, which defies our physics, by the way. How can they possibly be doing this? You try to scream, find that you can't. You wonder why your husband or wife has not awakened also. And you're then floated through walls, windows, doors, unbelievable stuff. And I realize that from our perspective, it's like, what are we looking at? How can, this is defying and breaking all our laws of physics. And I would certainly agree with that. But again, who's ever doing this has either technology or they're moving in ways that we don't understand yet. So for the benefit of this discussion, the person finds themselves floating through the wall, and they're taken aboard some sort of a ship. They find themselves on a metallic table covered with a sheet. Their clothes are removed from them at some point. Then they are surrounded again by more 4-foot grays with the large head and the black almond eyes. And this is what we see happening. These people are taken against their will, and we see that genetic material, eggs and ovum and sperm are taken from these abductees. And again, it goes into some sort of a breeding program, which Dr. Jacobs has researched. When he first got into this, and I interviewed him for my book, The Alien Interviews, he talks about when he realized that these people weren't crazy, that he sort of went into a shock tailspin for 6 months, walking around saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, just trying to deal with the fact that what he had first thought was, let's say, a psychic break with reality or mentally imbalanced people or whatever. He realized that, in fact, the phenomenon was real and that the end game is to create some sort of a human-alien hybrid which will look and pass as human. We're going to go and see a friend of mine, Dr. Roger Lear. Dr. Lear is a podiatrist and a surgeon, and he was drawn into the so-called alien implant removal. He's done about 16 of these surgeries, and they are absolutely phenomenal. We are going to get up close and personal with what these surgeries were and what Dr. Lear discovered when he took these implants out of human beings. What are we looking at here? I mean, I'm looking at, and I can see these like what appear to be implants. The skeptic's going to say, well, it's a BB gun or it's a wire from another operation. What are these objects we're looking at in the x-rays?
Well, I prefer really, Lynn, to take the skeptical point of view because I'm the one that's involved with it. So as far as I'm concerned, these are two cases in which there appears to be metallic foreign body. We don't know whether it's an implant or whether somebody picked up a flying nail. And these are two different cases. As you can see, this one appears to be in the joint, but it's really not. It's in probably soft tissue, with what we call a patellar tendon here. But this is an elongated object, and you can see it's metallic. And we know that it's metallic because in reference to the density of the bone, you can see that it's metal. This one here, these two cases, by the way, have not been done yet. These are pending surgeries that we'll do in the future. We use an X-ray device called a C-arm. And the C-arm is a live mobile unit, so that if you make an incision and you insert an instrument, you can see it as you're doing it. Wow. And it makes it a lot easier to locate the object and clamp it. Sometimes we found in doing these implant cases that the object moves.
I want to stop you there for a moment, because what you just said, I mean, you've traveled in this, you've witnessed it, but for the viewers who are listening to this for the first time, you just said the objects move. Can you clarify that the object moved away from you on its own power somehow? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. In these cases where you're dealing with a metallic object that's inside the body, you don't see anything from the outside with the naked eye. But when you insert an instrument in the tissue, most of the surgical instruments are stainless steel, and they're supposed to not have any kind of a magnetic field. But for whatever the reason, they seem to react with the magnetic field of the object, and it's as if two like ends of the magnet are towards each other, and the object gets propelled somewhere else. So we've seen this over and over and over again.
I want to get sort of the personal side of the story. When does a person, how do they first contact you and why? What is bothering that person that they would seek you out to begin with?
Well, they usually seek me out now. I mean, this is a drastic difference than when I started this, but we've done 16 surgeries today. So my name is known basically all over the world for doing this kind of research. But so when they come to me today, at today's date and time, they usually feel, number one, that they've been involved in the alien abduction phenomena, and that they have an object, or that they might have an object.
Okay.
What happened to you 20 years ago?
Oh, probably had a car accident, sighting. Learned quite a bit about God and the universe in a very short period of time. I feel to be a very fortunate man. And
Hi. Mike has been in on all these surgeries.
I truly understand the enormity of some of the statements I probably have made.
Yeah. Do you think that...
But I feel that... How do you put it? The truth will set you free, I guess. It's the only way you can look at it.
This was a patient who had one in the wrist. This came out of the wrist, and it's probably was 3/4 bigger than this piece. This piece is left. This one you should be able to get in.
That's very big. Where did that come out of?
This one, if I remember correctly, was out of a forearm.
Now, is that in a blood type serum? Or
this is it, yeah. This is in the serum from the patient. We find that they seem to be quite happy as long as there's some preservative that's like the human body that it came out of.
I understand you've got some scientific data on the alien implants. Can you explain that to us, please?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that we do is we try and look at these objects from the outside in, so to speak. So when we've gotten the amount of data that we need to get from looking at the outside, then we go deeper into the object and try and get more data as we go through it. And one of the modalities for doing this is testing called an SEM and an EDX. And we're actually looking at one instrument, which is the scanning electron microscope.
SEM. Okay.
SEM. And the EDX is only a term for breaking it down to be quite simple, getting the definitive elements that the object is composed of. And for example, here you see that there are two very large peaks. And at the top of the peak, you see there's an FE. Well, an FE stands for iron. So we can tell that the most abundant element in these objects is the iron. So just from looking at that alone doesn't really mean anything. But when you go further through, some of the other graphs, if we were to come up, for example, where we're starting to see nickel in these graphs, and then the ratio of nickel, for example, to the amount of iron that's seen, will give us a clue as to what kind of iron is this. I mean, is this something from Home Depot, or is this something from the Pleiades? So when we see a certain nickel-iron ratio in graphs just like this, we can say in most instances now that we know that it contains meteoric iron, because there's a specific nickel-iron ratio in meteorites. But one of the meteorites found on Earth, one category of meteorites, is a nickel-iron meteorite.
Okay.
The large meteorite strike in Arizona that created the
huge crater,
was one of these nickel iron meteorites, and of course you can tell by digging through the fragments. So that's the elemental analysis, which is part of scanning electron microscopy. And the other thing, we can use it to take pictures. So we can look at a first few, maybe up to 10 nanometers, just below the surface. Or we can crank up the beam, so to speak, so you get a heavy bombardment of electrons, and we can start to take pictures that are 20 nanometers or 40 nanometers going down through the object.
What did the SEM show you that was anomalous regarding the implants?
We use the data and results, and we can see structures. Structures like carbon nanotubes. You can see this is a structure. And this happens to be a structure, we don't know what it is. So we find things down in the deep crevices of the metal on an atomic level, and they can be ovoids, they can be spheres, or they can have other shapes.
And these do not occur in nature, correct? These nanotubes?
These do not occur in nature, and they don't really occur in the natural process of metallurgy that we use to put, unlike metals together and form a compound metal, which we call an alloy. So if we find an alloy of aluminum and iron, it would not look like this. This is something else. Now this is a very interesting one because it shows a line going across here, which is a definitive boundary line. And this is kind of interesting because you don't find in usual metallurgy metallic boundaries such as it's showing
Any
here.
idea what that might be used for?
The only thing that we can come up with is that there were two dissimilar elements that were put together for a reason.
If a skeptic were to look at the evidence, specifically the implants and some of the work that you've done with these, how would they refute them? Metallurgy, which was done off this world. Would you say that this is sort of a smoking gun? Could you call it a smoke? I mean, let me ask, I guess where I'm going with this is there any possible way that our government could create the nanotubes found in these implants, in your opinion?
I personally consider skeptics psychics. I tell them, I say, well, you seem to know everything that there is to know about what I'm talking about or somebody else is talking about, but you never look at the data. So therefore, you must be psychic. So that's in reference to skeptics. Now, in reference to the rest of the question, the smoking gun. Yeah, I would say this is pretty much of a smoking gun. We do know, as I stated before, that black budget science is way, way ahead of academic science. But I tend to doubt, just on a personal basis from what I've seen, that they know how to do all these kind of things. Let's give an example. Let's say if they back-engineered alien craft starting from 1947, which may have been crashes before 1947, but this one seemed to have a lot of attention. If they back-engineer that and we have a fleet of these craft that we've learned to fly and are flying around them, we've had 60-some odd years to do that with. But does that mean that they understand the totality of what they back-engineered? I would, take probably the best scientists, the best physicists that the world is able to buy and bet against it. It takes time for a society, even with hints, to grow to the point where you're able to use everything that an advanced society that's perhaps thousands or millions of years older, how could we catch up in 60 years or 100 years? So it's not logical. So when you say, yes, this is a smoking gun, it's a smoking gun from the standpoint of academic science. Here we have something you can put your finger on, you can look at it through a microscope, feel it, touch it, test it, and it doesn't come from here.
Fascinating. On a personal level, when some of these patients get these implants removed, what are they feeling? Are they feeling fear? Are they elated that they're removed? Just tell us about, on a personal level, what these people go through.
Well, most abductees are in a constant battle with themselves as to the reality of the situation. Many abductees would rather be diagnosed with a specific mental disease, which could be treatable, than to say I am the victim of somebody coming here from some society somewhere else and taking me against my will for some unknown reason and then doing something with my body. So, on the other hand, when they wake up in the morning and they've got a mark that wasn't on their body the night before, or they wake up and they have the feelings of the flu, with muscle aches and pains, extremely thirsty, vivid memories of something that went on, or they wake up and they're not wearing the bedclothes that they went to bed with, then they are in a situation where they begin to wonder, was this a dream or is it a reality? And that begins to carry through. So in most abductees, and I've studied now hundreds, if not thousands of cases, this battle will continue beyond that of a metallic or non-metallic object that's in the body. One of the things that when they come to the realization that we have an x-ray of an object that was in my body that wasn't there the night before, it tends to push them towards the reality that, yes, this is a real phenomenon. It's occurring to me, you know, in our real 3D world, not in a dream or some semi-quasi delusional dream state. So then they accept the reality, and then they have to decide whether they want to keep it or whether they want it out. So naturally, all the patients that we've done the removals on have wanted it out.
In your opinion, what do you think that these implants are doing? Are they perhaps changing the very DNA structure of an individual, or maybe they're tracking devices? What do you think about that?
I'm fairly well convinced that they are not tracking devices, and this is based on several interviews I've done with abductees that have had objects that did not want them removed. One was a case in Brazil who had 2 objects in a toe, but she chose not to have it removed. I lost touch with her, and I really don't know what happened. But she told me in discussing what these objects did, I said, well, you think it could be a tracking device? And she just laughed. I mean, she just gave me the horse laugh. And I said, well, why do you think that's so funny? She said, well, let me tell you. There was an episode with ETs in which they stopped a bug in mid-flight right in front of her in some kind of a beam of light or beam of energy. And they told her that they had the ability to track the DNA of that bug anywhere on this planet. So she said, do you think it's really necessary to have a device to do that? Well, that was some years before we, you know, geneticists, earthly geneticists, realized that each one of our DNA strands has its own electrical configuration. So if we were smart enough, and maybe someday we will be smart enough, all we have to do is build a receiver. If we build a receiver for your DNA, I could track you anywhere. So an advanced civilization using an artificial device to track you, I don't believe makes any sense whatsoever. So what do these things do? Some think they could be behavior modification devices. I really came up with a pet theory. I think that since most abductions involve the taking of ova and sperm, that it's pretty safe to say there's some genetic effect that's going on. Now, Dr. David Jacobs thinks they're making hybrid beings to perhaps repopulate the planet in case some disastrous event occurs, or maybe for some other reason. I'm not saying he's wrong. There very well could be a plan to develop hybrids, and maybe there's hybrids among us.
But I think that the spectra of the phenomena is so worldwide and involves so many people all over the planet. I don't think that's the main objective of the group who's doing the most of the abductions. I think that it's more logical to me that they're doing something with our genetics, which they've probably done before. Because if you especially would know, if you look into the biblical history, there's things in the Bible that have all kinds of indications that people have been changed from time to time. Going back all the way to the story of the Tower of Babel.
Sure.
We build the tower, it goes up, God doesn't like it, and what does he do?
Confuses everyone's language.
He confuses the language. Well, what's the converse of that? If he confuses the language so that you can't communicate, and there were, some extensive geographical areas which had to develop, as we did, our own language, then how did we communicate before? But there are people that I have met personally that if there is such a thing as a hybrid, they sure fill the bill.
How would you describe that, elaborate on that for us?
Well, I can give you a classic example. I did last year, I think it was the Bay Area UFO Expo, and a tall fellow with sparse blonde hair came up and was sort of listening to one of our conversations and seemed to be very interested and so on, and one of the members of our group struck up a conversation with him, and in the course of the conversation he was asked, "Where do you come from?" He said, "Well, I came from a long way to this conference to hear, what you researchers have had to say." And it's, well, how far did you come? Well, I came from Colorado. And yeah, well, that's really great. What do you do? Well, I'm a computer, electronics engineer. I work with the computers. And he was asked, well, I guess you're probably a really good skier. And he said, a what? Skiing. Don't you go skiing? And he said, what's skiing?
Whoa.
Well, I think to myself many times, what would it take to convince the masses? Because we have to, if President Obama came out on national television and said, ladies and gentlemen, I have something to tell you. This is one of the most important things that's happened to mankind. We now know that there are extrasolar planets that have life forms like us, and not only that, but we've learned that they are and have been visiting here for many, many years. I would predict that the following thing would happen: would people, turn the dial and find out what the score on the Lakers game is, or a craft, for example. About mass. A craft comes down, lands at rush hour time in the middle of a Hollywood freeway. Talk about panic. Yeah, I think there really would be a panic, because people would be right away on their cell phones calling some division of the state, Caltrans, to find out when they were going to get it out of there so that they could get home, to watch the Rams. That would be the panic.
That's it.
So people are so entrenched in their daily activities. Okay, well, that's nice. We're being visited by non-terrestrials, but I still got to get up and go to work in the morning, and I'm lucky to have a job because, etc. So what would it take to really, show mankind that the most important thing in history is going on? Better than the president, I think, if Walter Cronkite was alive. And he came out on television, he'd have a better chance of convincing anybody than anybody else I know. So maybe it's only going to come if there is some kind of a mass, 1939 type landing, non-hostile, landing with people, constantly looking up. People never look up. They look down. They look straight ahead. They don't look up. You have people, planes flying by laying chemtrails. And they
All the
look up
time.
and they say, oh, look, that's a nice thing that the airplane's doing. Must be cold up there because look at the ice crystals. Of course, that was laid down at 6 a.m. and it's now 5 and the sky's all cloudy. So, waking up the masses, that's the big question.
If the so-called extraterrestrial presence manifests, it will be what I would call a mega shift in human consciousness. It will change people's worldview and paradigms like that. We are told in ancient prophetic manuscripts that such an event will come in the last days. Implants are giving out radio signals, correct?
That's correct. The last few of them that we've done, since we had the equipment, we were able to detect radio frequencies, usually in the FM band, on a classified FCC chart, and found that this particular frequency was a deep space communications frequency, fixed or mobile. So that was quite of a shock.
God created them male and female. Did you know God invented marriage and the family and sex? I mean, he invented the whole thing. And he wants it to be wonderful. But so he put some rules down. Boys, don't touch the girls till you're married to them. Now, if you don't want to touch them, then stay away from me. I saw your kind in San Francisco, okay? But God put the rules down. He put the rules down because he wants the best. He said the adulteress will hunt for the precious life. God doesn't want you hunting for a precious life. He wants you to have a precious life. Hey, do you know why these Hollywood folks have to get married again every 6 months? Or Britney Spears, 55 hours. Jennifer Lopez, 7 months. Brandy Norwood, less than 2 years, less than 6 months. Zsa Zsa Gabor, married 1 day. Do you know why they got to get married again every 6 months? They're hunting for the precious life. They don't have it. Now listen carefully. Don't pay any attention to Hollywood. They don't have a clue, not the clue in the world how to have a precious life. If you want to have a precious life, you keep yourself pure till you walk down that aisle and the preacher says, wilt thou, and then you wilt, or whatever they do, and then you stay faithful to that one the rest of your life. That is the precious life. Don't believe Hollywood for a second. They don't have a clue, all right? The Bible says in Genesis 1, God said, I'm going to make man in his own image. If we're made in the image of God, why do we teach the kids? Grandpa was an ape. Now, evolution teaches we're getting better, and someday we're going to become God. The facts are, we're getting worse. Things are falling apart. We now have an incredible genetic load. We are mentally and physically deficient compared to Adam and Eve. Things are not getting better. But we all teach the kids in the textbooks, this is Grandpa. What's the truth about the cavemen? Is it possible for an ape-like creature to turn to a human? Well, it depends what you mean by caveman. Okay, there are people today who live in caves. Okay, we don't call them half ape, half human. There's the world's most wanted caveman right there, Osama bin Laden. There's a former caveman. I think someone's trying to make a monkey out of us. Was your ancestor an ape-like creature? I don't think so. Let's talk about a few of the so-called cavemen. We could spend hours on this topic, but we got more to cover here. Nebraska man was used for years as evidence for evolution. All they found for Nebraska man was one tooth. That is the entire Nebraska man right there. One tooth. Then they built an entire man from that one tooth and later made him a wife. Now you have to really be good to know what his wife looks like from his tooth. Okay, but these are professionals, don't question them, okay? They know what they're talking about. Later, they found out the tooth actually came from a pig. There's the real Nebraska man right there. How about Piltdown Man, named after the gravel pit it was found in Piltdown, England. Somebody took a human skull and an ape's jaw, they filed them down and fooled everybody. In 1912, they discovered the Piltdown Man. It was in the New York Times. Darwin theory proved true from the Piltdown Man. It was going to be used in 1925 at the Scopes monkey trial as part of the evidence for evolution, but the judge said the question is not, is there evidence for evolution? The question is, did he violate the law of teaching? So he was found guilty of breaking the law. The teacher was John T. Scopes down here in Dayton, Tennessee. But Piltdown Man was a hoax. Somebody had taken an ape's jawbone and a human skull, broke the TMJs off, made them fit together, and fooled everybody, filed the teeth down. For 40 years, it was in the textbooks as proof for evolution. It was a fraud, exposed as a fraud, 1953. Neanderthal Man is still in your textbooks, used in your town here in Knoxville, Tennessee. But it's been proven years ago it cannot possibly be a missing link. Long story about the Neander Valley, named after Joachim Neander, that wrote the song in the songbook, Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of Creation. Great godly man. Back in 1856, they found a skeleton petrified, a man petrified, in this valley called the Neander Valley, and they named it Neanderthal Man. The back was bent over. Well, apes walk on 4 legs and man walks on 2, so when the Darwin's theory became popular, they resurrected the Neanderthal man and said, oh, wow, maybe he's slowly evolved and he's coming up. Well, they've known from the very beginning it was an old man with arthritis who's slowly going down. He's not coming up at all. He's headed down. But they still keep him in the textbooks. About 300 Neanderthals have been found. Their brains are bigger than ours. Their bone structure was incredibly strong. They said they had so many muscles that the average Neanderthal could probably pick up the average NFL linebacker and fling him over the goalpost. Phenomenal strength in the Neanderthals. They gave the same skull to 9 different artists and said, what did he look like in life? They got 9 different answers. They said, what would you like him to look like? We're artists, you know. We can make him, you want him ape-like or human-like? You tell us what you want. We'll do it. Jack Cuazzo, a friend of mine from New Jersey, has been a dentist for 32 years. He came and spoke at our conference a few weeks ago at the boot camp we had in Pensacola. He studied the actual Neanderthal skulls in Europe. He said these Neanderthals are just perfectly normal humans that are living to really great age. See, before the flood came, the people lived to be 900. After the flood, lifespans dropped off to 400, and then 200, and then 100. But that's still a long time to live. And it's a simple fact, the bones of your eyebrow ridge never stop growing. So if you could live to be 300 or 400 years old, your eyebrow ridge would stick way out. People today that use their jaws a lot, like the Aborigines in Australia, are always using their jaws as a vice. They don't carry a toolbox with them. Their eyebrow ridge sticks out really far because of the chewing muscles. It pulls on the bone. The Neanderthals are perfectly normal human that are living to be 200 or 300 years old. That's all they are. Their brain's bigger than ours. They're not subhuman at all. They're just really old human. There's an Aborigine on the far left over there. See the eyebrow ridge sticking out? That's from chewing or using your jaw muscles a lot. There are a lot of different shapes of head. You could line up the folks in Knoxville, Tennessee and prove evolution just by the shape of the skull. And drive downtown. You'll see what I'm talking about, okay? There's Cro-Magnon man, still used in the textbooks, yet it's perfectly normal human. Why on earth is that considered a missing link? They've got one in there called Homo sapien is modern man. He's listed as Cro-Magnon. It's not modern, it's not a missing link at all. One they've got in there now is called Australopithecus afarensis. That was proven wrong in 1973. 30 years ago, proven wrong. Why are they keeping that in the textbooks as evidence for evolution? They've got Australopithecus africanus, or afarensis, better known as Lucy. How many have ever heard of Lucy before? Donald Johanson found Lucy in 1974, Ethiopia. He had gone there with a grant to look for missing links. Somebody gave him some money, said, here, go find a missing link. If you don't find one, no more money. 2 weeks before his grant money expired, he discovered Lucy. Highly motivated, I suspect. And that would be a suspect, by the way, in a court of law, you know. Lucy was 3 feet tall. It was obviously a chimpanzee of some kind. Now, the bones of the skull were crushed thoroughly. Could not tell anything about the skull. But when they put it together for your kid's textbook, they can make it half human, half ape. They named it Lucy because they were listening to the song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Very popular back then. which, by the way, has the initials LSD, which they must have been on when they found this thing. But the knee joint that was labeled Lucy's knee in National Geographic was actually found 1.5 miles away and 200 feet deeper. But National Geographic labeled it Lucy's knee. It's not Lucy's knee. It's 1.5 miles away, for heaven's sake, okay? There's quite a controversy about that knee joint still. But the knee joint is the best evidence they have that Lucy was becoming a human. Because an ape has the lower and upper leg that are in a straight line with each other. A human leg goes up to your knee and angles off to the side because your hips are wider than your knees. Lucy's knee angled off to the side, the femur angled. And Donald said, see, that proves she's becoming a human. No, any monkey that climbs trees has an angled femur. What he found was a tree-climbing monkey. It's not proof it's becoming a human. He said, well, the bones are slightly bigger than a regular ape. Well, that's true. It doesn't prove it's becoming a human. The bones of a Clydesdale are slightly bigger than a regular horse. It doesn't prove it's becoming a truck, for heaven's sake, okay? What he found was a heavy-duty chimpanzee, and probably the pre-flood chimpanzees and everything was probably more heavy-duty. If they're living longer, much healthier, that's all he found. There are big horses and little horses today, by the way. St. Louis Zoo put human feet on their Lucy display. Not one foot bone or hand bone was found. Not one. Every other Australopithecine that's been found has curled toes. Professor Minton at Washington University said the statue is a complete misrepresentation. That's a big fancy word for lie. I prefer smaller words. It's a lie. The zoo director said, zoo officials have no plans to knuckle under. We cannot be updating every exhibit based on every new piece of evidence. We look at the overall exhibit and the impression it creates, and we think this impression it creates is correct. Bruce, are you telling me you would lie to kids coming through your zoo just to get an impression across to them that evolution is true? You mean your theory is more important than the facts? That's exactly correct. They will lie to the kids going through these science centers and zoos to make them believe this evolution theory. And there are lies in the textbooks, like 60 of them. We covered that on video number 4, lies in the textbooks. The other philosophy of government is based on creation, which says laws come from the Creator, rights are unalienable, and government should be limited. It's called a republic. More on that on video number 5. We could talk about that for 2 hours. Genesis 1:30, and we'll quit here. God said, to every beast of the earth, to every fowl of the air, and everything that creepeth upon the earth, when there is life, I've given green herb. You mean everything that lived on earth ate plants before the flood came? That's exactly right. You say, Brother Hovind, look at those teeth. Now that's a meat eater. No, that's a panda bear. You know, sharp teeth do not indicate meat eating. There's a deer in China. It's called the water deer. You can look it up on the internet. Water deer. Has teeth like a saber-toothed tiger. You look at a saber-tooth, oh, wow, that's a meat eater. No, that's a vegetarian, okay? How about that one? Now, that's a meat eater. Look at those sharp teeth, Hovind. No, sorry, that's a fruit bat. How about that one? That's a meat eater. No, that's a vegetarian monkey. There's a lion that refused to eat meat all of its life. Lived to be 11 years old. It was used in movies as an actor. Finally got killed in an accident on the movie set. Refused to eat meat of any kind. After the flood's over, Genesis 9, God blessed Noah and the boys and said, go have a bunch of kids. And boy, they did too. Here we are. He said, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth. You know the first change after the flood? Animals became afraid of man. They weren't afraid before. Now they became afraid of man. Second change after the flood, God said, Noah, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Now you can eat meat. And because of that, there's a lot of suffering in the world. Animals suffer so we can eat, and it's perfectly fine to eat meat. But God made a perfect world, and man destroyed it. Man brought death and sin into this world. Paul said, for I reckon, that proves he's a Southerner, that the sufferings of this present time, is there suffering in the world today? Lots of it. The whole world's filled with groaning and travailing and pain. Charlie Darwin said, I'm bewildered. I had no intention to write atheistically. But there seems to be so much misery in the world. Charlie couldn't understand why God made a world with suffering. Charlie, God didn't make a world with suffering. But Charlie Darwin thought, from the war of famine and nature and death Famine, war of nature was from famine and death, the most exalted object we're capable of conceiving. Wait a minute. Charlie, are you saying that war and famine and death is what exalts us to a higher level? That's exactly what he says, and that's exactly what evolution teaches today. Nothing's changed. Death is the hero of the plot for the evolutionist. The Bible says God made a perfect world. Man wrecked it. By one man, sin came into the world, and death by sin. It was Adam's fault. You can't blame a wrecked car on the manufacturer. Send a picture to the manufacturer of a wreck and say, hey, why did you build a car like this? It didn't look like this when it left the factory. Today, folks, we are living in a junkyard. I like living on planet Earth, and Knoxville's a beautiful place, but I'm telling you, folks, this is nothing compared to what Adam and Eve saw. This is a junkyard. But God's going to fix it back. Someday the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the kid and the calf and the young lion and a fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. A little child's going to lead a leopard or a lion? Hey, Mommy, look at the big kitty I found. Can I keep the kitty, Mommy? Sure, honey, put the big kitty in the backyard and give her some grass. You say, Hovind, lions don't eat grass. Oh, they will one day. The lion shall eat straw like the ox. A guy in Canada sent me a video clip of bears in his yard eating grass for 2 hours straight. Just nothing but grass. The Bible says the child shall die 100 years old. They're going to rule and reign with Christ for 1,000 years. Now, there's not enough scripture to be real dogmatic, but it appears that there's going to be a 1,000-year span coming after the end of this age, when if you're saved, you're going to get to live here for 1,000 years. With everything fixed back, Garden of Eden conditions. Kids, you're going to get to have your own pet dinosaurs. That's going to be cool. Then he's going to make new heavens and a new earth. Isaiah 65, 2 Peter 3. New heavens, new earth. Revelation 21, new heaven, new earth. You can't even imagine what that's going to be like. I sure can't. The Bible says, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. God has things planned for his kids that you can't even think about. I'm going to give you one to try to think about, and then we'll quit, go get some lunch. This is the electromagnetic spectrum. I taught physics. I got to get this in here somewhere. This contains all the different wavelengths, radio waves, microwaves, including a little bitty slice called light. The color spectrum, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Your eyeball is able to see those colors, but that's only a small piece of a huge spectrum. Suppose God gives us new eyes when we get to heaven, and we're able to see the entire spectrum. That means there'll be brand new colors. Not new shades of these colors. I'm talking brand new colors. That's why heaven has to be so large. It's for the women's closets. My wife's going to say, honey, does this go with this? I'll say, dear, I couldn't figure it out back on earth. She has to number my ties to go with my suits because I don't know what goes with what. Secondly, I don't care. I just want to get dressed. Would you lay it out, please? Anybody else feel that way about it? Say, I don't know what goes with what. Just put it together for me. Amen. There you go. Your mom or your wife says, that doesn't match. Well, how am I supposed to know? You know, where's the rule book on that, huh? Hey, suppose we get to heaven and God gives us new eyes that can see the whole spectrum, and we'll be able to see the sounds coming off the musical instruments. Right now we can only hear them. What if you could see them? Or smell them? C major diminished. Play it again. What if we get new ears that can hear the whole spectrum? What if you could hear the colors? Or smell them? Or taste them? Blue. Wow. We've only got 5 senses, folks. Maybe there are more. But if God just took these 5 and expanded them to the max, we would spend forever walking around heaven going, wow. Have you smelled that? Lick that. Wow. My first computer was an IBM XT8088, 4.77 megahertz. When you told it to load a program, you might as well go get lunch and open the mail and take a nap because it's going to be a while. How many had one of those old-time computers? We've upgraded. My computer sitting here now is a Pentium 4, 3.4 gigahertz with hyperthreading, 60 gig hard drive, 2 gig of RAM. The same programs run, but they're much faster, and they're in color. That's called a systems upgrade. Did you know if you like living in your body with the sights and sounds and tastes of this world, wait till you get to heaven. You're headed for a systems upgrade that's going to blow your mind. The only question is, are you going? Paul said, I knew a man in Christ 14 years ago who was caught up to the third heaven. I think he's talking about himself. I think he actually died and was caught up to the third heaven. And he heard things that were unspeakable. You can't even explain it. Hey, could you explain colors to a blind man? Try it sometime. Can you explain sounds to a deaf person? Just try that sometime. Can you explain heaven to an earthling? Can't be done. You couldn't understand it. Beyond your capabilities. But boy, for the rest of his life, when Paul came back down, he was anxious to go back to heaven. He told the Philippians, I've got a desire to depart and be with Christ, but I'll stay here because you need me. Paul would go to town preaching, and they'd say, Paul, if you don't knock off that preaching, we're going to kill you. Really? Give me your best shot, man. Let's go. He was anxious to go. How about you? You ready to go? God made this world. He owns it. He makes the rules, and we all broke His rules. He told us real clearly, thou shalt not bear false witness. Don't lie. We've all lied. He told us, don't steal. We've all stolen. You can read, and that's only 10. There's over 600 commandments in the Old Testament. That's only 10. We've broken a lot of them, folks. There's no question. We are guilty, and we're going to be punished. Or we need to find a substitute. That's where Jesus comes in. He's willing and able to substitute for your sins. And February 9th, 1969, I said, Lord, I am a sinner, and I deserve to go straight to hell, but I believe you died for me, and I'd like you to forgive me. I want you to pay for my sins, Lord. I'm sorry. I have broken your rule. I am hopelessly, helplessly lost. But I believe you can fix it. Please save me. The Bible says, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Romans 10:13. So that day I called on the Lord and gave my heart to Him, and He saved me. And today, if I die, I'm going to heaven. It's not because I'm good. Are you kidding? If I get what I deserve, I'm in trouble. And you are too. The preacher was down praying with the deacon one time, and the preacher took off down running down the aisle, racing out the back door. And somebody stopped him and said, Preacher, where are you going? He said, I got to get out of here. He said, why? Why, preacher? He said, I was down there praying with the deacon. Yeah? So what? That deacon was praying. He said, Lord, just give me what I deserve. I don't want to be close when he gets it, man. I'm getting out of here. Man, I don't want what I deserve. I want God's mercy. Have you got that? If you died today, where would you go? Smoking or non-smoking? You're going to be dead for a really long time. You better think about that one. Now, if you're saved, what on earth are you doing for heaven's sake? What are you doing for the Lord? Kids, you can go to sleep. You won't understand this, but parents, you'll understand this. Mom can wash the clothes, dry them, fold them, and set them by the bedroom door. The kid comes in and doesn't even see them. How many know what I'm talking about? It's like, didn't you see those clothes? I think God's up in heaven looking down at some of His kids saying, don't you see what needs to be done? You know, hello, do something. You know, pass out a gospel tract, get somebody saved, you know, start a Sunday school class. Do something. What are you doing for the Lord? We hope you've enjoyed this video series on creation, evolution, and dinosaurs. Much more important, though, than knowing all the truth and facts about science is to know the truth about whether you're going to heaven or not. If you've never trusted Christ as your Savior, let me explain quickly what you need to do to go to heaven. The Bible says we're all sinners. We've all broken God's laws. We've disobeyed the Creator. We've done wicked things. We're sinners. Some are worse than others, at least in man's eyes, but we've all broken God's laws. And the Bible says you have to repent. The word repent means to turn. It actually means two things, to turn from your sin and to turn to God. God's looking for a change in your attitude where you say, Lord, I don't want to do wrong anymore. I'm sorry, I've offended you. I want to do right. And you turn from sin and you turn to God and say, God, would you please forgive me? Would you save me? The Bible says in Romans chapter 3, verse 23, that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. You need to admit you're a sinner. Number two, the Bible says in Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death. We deserve to die and go to hell because of our sin. But Jesus died for you. He loves you. He wants you to come to heaven. And anybody that will ask Him for the free salvation, God will give you the gift of eternal life. It says in Romans 6:23. It's a free gift. And it says in Romans chapter 10 and verse 13, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. If you would just call and say, Lord, I'm a sinner, would you please forgive me? And ask Him. He will give you that free gift of eternal life. Why don't you just pray with me right now, and you could receive Christ as your Savior. There's no magic words. God's looking at your heart. But if you could say this and mean it, God would forgive you. Just say, Dear Lord Jesus, I know that I'm a sinner. I've broken your laws. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Please apply your blood to my account. Forgive my sins and take me to heaven. In Jesus' name, amen. The Bible says if you call upon the Lord, you shall be saved. So if you've asked the Lord to save you, He promised He'd save you. Now your job is to grow. Read your Bible, pray, get involved in a good Bible-believing church, and begin to grow to be a good Christian. Thank you so much. Call or write if we can be any help at all. We'd be glad to help.
For more information on the Ministry of Creation Science Evangelism, write us at Creation Science Evangelism, P.O. Box 37338, Pensacola, Florida 32526, USA, or call us at 850-479-3466. That's 850-479-DINO. You may also visit us on the web at www.drdino.com. That's www.drdino.com.
Now, it is the debt being owed the International Monetary Fund and the banks that the banks in Europe and the United States are now calling for a new world order. I'm telling you something. I'm going to be careful saying this because I don't want someone coming to me and saying, who told you and who said this? But there are people who work in Washington, D.C. in the highest levels of our government who are Christians. And there are many of them who now say it appears that the administration in Washington is willfully attempting to bring the economy of the United States down. And people say, why would anybody do it? Can I tell you what the answer is? Henry Kissinger and others, and George Soros and others, want the United States to become the United States of Europe. Europe is a socialist country. It has socialist health care, etc., etc. And to create a new world order, I've got the quotes. I'm not preaching on that tonight. That's why I'm not bringing the quotes out. But I've got the quotes where they have said for the new world order to work, you have to have the United States in it. And as long as the American people love their dollar, as long as they love their Constitution, and as long as they love freedom, they're never going to submit to a European, Canadian type of system that dictates to you and removes your freedoms to tell you that you can't preach a certain way, that you got to run your sermon through the government before you get up and preach the gospel. Come on, talk to me, somebody. And I know that we've got people that think that people in this Tea Party are a bunch of nuts. I've got news for you. They haven't seen the party yet, because I know a lot of people that haven't even joined that's getting ready to, because they love this country too much to let it go down the tubes with people that have an agenda of their own, and they're not concerned about the average person and their needs. That's heavy. I know it's heavy, but you need to hear it. Now, I've saved the heaviest part for last. In the Bible, and I'm going to abbreviate this, but in the Bible it says, there will come a time that to buy or sell, you have to have a mark, a name or number, and it involves the right hand and the forehead. 20 years ago, in common places, you would have never seen this. 10 years ago, some of this you wouldn't see. 5 years ago, some of this you wouldn't see. Bring up number 13, I'm sorry. The biometric hand scanner. I went to Disney 2 years ago, put my hand in a scanner, and then the guy slipped my card in there, which was my entrance card. I said, what did you just do? He said, here's what this does. The scanner takes 90 different measurements of the hand, including the thickness of the palm and the surface. It gives the 90 measurement individual numbers that can be stored information and transferred to the card. It doesn't take anything with your fingerprint. He said it just numbers your hand. And he said what happens is those numbers are transferred to the card. So if somebody tries to come in and use your card and get into the park, we have to check their hand. If the hand doesn't match the card, they don't get in. It's called a biometric hand scanner. There are businesses now that have these. So, don't miss the point. You have to lay your right hand in it. Not your left, your right. All the scanners have the right hand. And it's interesting that it puts a number on the fingerprints or the lines and the width of the what? Right hand. Now, several years ago, hold off on the second one, Larry, just wait a minute. Several years ago, I was preaching in a neighboring state in the 1990s, and they said, you got to go meet this man. I went and met a man. He is not a Christian, but he was he dealt with satellites. Let me just say that. And he said to me, he says, I can contact the space shuttle right now. I said, you got to be kidding me. He was in his home. He goes to a computer, he does a few things, and he starts talking to the guys who are in the space shuttle. I thought, this is freaky. How are you doing this? He said, well, look at the big antenna in my yard back there. Look at the big dish. And he was very open. He said, oh, do you know what they've got in the space shuttle right now? You know what they're testing? I said, no, what? He said, a chip. I said, what do you mean a chip? He said, it's a chip going to go in your right hand to your forehead. I said, oh, come on. He said, no, I'm serious. He said, you want to talk to him? I said, no, that's okay. I said, what are they doing? He said, well, they're doing some experiments with it. He said, it has a lithium battery in it. And he said, one day it'll be put in your hand, your forehead. You won't need money. You'll just scan your hand, or they'll scan over top of your head. I said, why the head? He said, well, some people don't have hands. I said, well, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. And he said, but anyway, it'll have information on it. And said, you won't have to have a credit card. You won't have to have money. He said, it's going to go to that. And this was 1996. So I always waited for somebody to give me more updated information. So I get a call. I get a call from a preacher friend of mine who is on a plane. He had exited a plane. He said, I've got to call you, Perry. I've got to talk to you. So he called me from Florida. He said, I just got off a plane with a man who's a medical doctor. This medical doctor was coming into a certain city to meet with 3,000 doctors about the new health care chip. And he said there's a health care chip that they've been working on it for several years. Now listen to what I'm going to say. This was May of 2009, and when this man said, yeah, there's going to be a health care chip, they're going to put it right in your hand, right above your forehead, and he said it's going to have all your health care information. He said you're not going to have to do paperwork. You just scan your hand, they do a scan of you. It's got everything on there. It's got a digit number, all your information. He said that's where it's going to go. He said, now, we've had this for a while, but we've tested it on people, and some blood types reject it. And the government's had us working on this to make sure that all the blood types, and I think we've got it perfected. He said, you will have it inserted at your local hospital. And this was the man's exact quote. This was May of 2009. President Obama is demanding we have it done by the end of the year. Now I want to make a statement, and I can back it up because I've got the proof of it. The reason President Obama pushed health care through, absolutely demanding that it had to go through, was actually not just about caring for people who need health. It was about the health care chip. It is a tracking device. Now listen to me. And they the reason I know this, right here in Georgia, a man had a meeting with the company that was doing it, and they said, it's $10 a month. Add up $10 a month times 12 months, that's $120, add up over 300 million Americans who have to have it, and add that up, and they're going to make money off the chip. Now, they originally told me that in 2013 is when they wanted everybody to have it, and they wanted it to have the government-controlled health care, and that's the reason they wanted government-controlled health care, passed a law where everybody had to do it. But I want to tell you something about the state of Georgia. You have a senator. Now, it's not a state senator. It's not a senator in Washington, but you have a state senator I personally met, and thank God, when I preached this in Cartersville, Georgia, said, Perry, I have already gone through the State House to pass a regulation that they cannot insert chips in people in the state of Georgia in their forehead and in their hand. A senator, hey, There is a senator or a congressman from the state of Virginia who has challenged it and is trying to pass it in Virginia. There's someone in Pennsylvania trying to pass it in Pennsylvania. They know it's there, and there are people who are trying to pass legislations to say you will not put a tracking chip of any kind in the right hand or forehead. In fact, one guy that's not a Christian said, this sounds too much to me like something I've heard people talk about in the apocalypse, and I don't want my people being tracked. Now, I'm just telling you something. Did I show that chip yet? Did I show it yet, Larry? It's called the RFID, radio frequency tag implant, and it has a lithium battery in it. The new ones are smaller than the size of a grain of rice, and so I'm just trying to share with you that this is not second or third hand information. I've got this directly from people who know about this, and this is why, folks, this is why they shoved health care through. It wasn't just about all these other things. All the other stuff is side stuff. This is a money maker for them and for the insurance companies and for whoever's involved with this. And so thank the Lord. I'm going to say thank the Lord for people who are making a stand. Now I will tell you this. See there it is implanted in somebody's right hand. See right there, right in this area here. And it feels like a little bump. Listen. I will say this publicly. I'm not afraid to say this publicly. You want to give me a card with my name and a chip on the back, I'm fine with that because I have credit cards, bank cards anyway. But I refuse to put something in my right hand and my forehead that is comparable to Revelation 19. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Now, they have then come up, because some people may not like that, they've come up with the tattoo. Let's look at the tattoo. The RFID ink, RFID is radio frequency identification, has been tested and proven to work. It is it's a chip, but it simply is a chip with ink. It's been tested on animals. It's supposed to be safe on people. The company from St. Louis in the United States has invented this and come up with this. The ink does not contain any metals. Listen to what's interesting. It can be invisible or it can be in color. It is safe for people and animals. It takes 8 to 10 seconds to implant the hard chip in your right hand or forehead. Just 8 to 10 seconds. This happens in 5 to 10 seconds. And they can stamp a tattoo on you. A reader, an electronic reader, can detect it 4 feet away. They use multiple needles to implant it in the skin. Data is stored in the design itself. And you can store up to 15 digits of information. Now here's the part that's weird. The little small chip, the grain of rice, the size of the grain of rice, has now been implanted in 2.5 million people. In Canada, they wanted to insert it in a group of people working at a company. And at the company, 3 Pentecostals sued them and said, this is against our religion. They took it all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, and the Pentecostals won their case. Amen. They gave them a card, but they did not insert it in the hand. I was with Darlene Bishop, and Darlene said, Perry, this is so strange you mentioned this. We have a couple in our church whose son, he works on a barge, and they said to him, the federal government, Homeland Security, is demanding that you put this tracking chip with your name. It's a device. She probably told you all publicly about this. And in your right hand or forehead. He said, I'm not doing it. They said, you're fired. He said, you can't fire me over my religious belief. He challenged that, and he had to pay $800 for a card, if I recall, that has a gold foil on the back with the information. Now, I'll tell you this. Gold foil card is absolutely fine. You want to put a number on a card, that is not what the Bible says. It says nothing about a card. It tells you on the hand or on the forehead. Now, I'm not trying to spook anybody with this, but I'm simply trying to tell you that the technology is there. Now, listen to what the Bible says happens in the tribulation after people receive the mark in the hand and forehead. The angel goes out and pours his bowl upon the earth, and a foul and loathsome sore came upon the men that had the mark of the beast and who worshipped his image. The word sore in Revelation 16:2 is the same word for ulcer, and it is used for the rich man that was full of sores in Luke 16:21, same Greek word. Now, why would someone with the mark in their hand or on their forehead, why would a sore break out? Because if they use a lithium battery, lithium batteries have been in cell phones that have exploded and burnt holes in people's pants. Are you listening? It causes a very serious chemical burn. Listen, it also causes a foul smell. A foul and loathsome sore came upon the men. Now, China is in the process of trying to make these these safer. They call it a lithium ion, trying to make it safer. But my point is, if that were to be inserted as is now, there is no question. Crushing it would release the battery, producing a terrible sore in the right hand or in the forehead. Once again, it's interesting. It's interesting to see we are a generation that is seeing the technology develop. Lithium ion cells with cobalt cathodes, the same as as some of the recalled laptop batteries recently, should never rise above 130 degrees Celsius or 265 degrees Fahrenheit. At 302 degrees, the cell becomes unstable and the condition leads to thermal runaway, in which flaming gases are vented. In other words, if it got too hot, it's going to create the situation very similar to what you... But wait a minute, that's not the big one yet. Here's the big one. The new chip from China, the smallest RFID tag in the world. I want everybody to look at that picture. Hitachi has developed a chip that measures 0.05 times 0.05 millimeters. It almost gets lost on the fingertip. These are called powder tags, and some are 60 times smaller than the previous tags. The new one can hold 128-bit ROM information for storing a 38-digit number. Whew. To write data on it, electron beams are used, and they can be inserted like a powder on the hand. You can throw them. In fact, let me just tell you what the government would like to use these for. In a large crowd that they think could get crazy, they scatter these. They throw them. Anybody remember Mission Impossible years ago where they put the tag on? That was a tracking tag. They had those, by the way. That wasn't something fake. This is so tiny they can throw it on somebody and it literally can monitor them and track them through satellite. Whoo, is anybody hearing? These small ones can be inserted in paper, gift certificates, and money. They can be read by a scanner 10 inches away. Hello, somebody help me now. Somebody, are you listening to this? Shout yes if you're listening. The government is taking control of the mortgage industry, the banking industry. GMC is now owned by the government. They're taking control of the student loans now. You have to go through the government to get the student loan. Can't go through a bank. Forcing Americans to take health care. Getting ready to hire 16,000 IRS agents to audit your books, penalize you if you didn't do what they want you to do. Republican Dingell said the health care bill will eventually control the people. The doctor who invented the chip on the airplane told my friend, there will be no place to hide. The recent update I got was 2017, everybody is going to have the health care chip. Listen to what I'm going to say. Why do you think the president exempted the unions to 2017? You didn't hear what I just said. The unions are exempt to certain of the health care thing, but in 2017 they're going to be re-looking at it because that's the date that everybody's supposed to have the chip in the right hand or in the forehead. Now, you know, people will hear this and they'll say, well, that sounds like fanaticism, that sounds crazy. No, my friend, we have contacts in Israel, contacts in Europe, contacts in the United States, and people who are fully aware that this is something that's going to happen. Well, how come they haven't told us? Well, dear, why should they? Are you kidding me? If the president got up and said, I'm going to put a chip in your right hand and forehead in the southeastern part of the United States, there would be a war breakout. You understand what I'm saying? Because Christians who know the Bible, oh, come on, I'm going to preach this right here. Now, here's what scares me. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Here's what scares me about this beast technology is the older people who were raised in church know what the Bible predicts. Everybody sitting here sits under good preaching and teaching, and you know where this thing is going. So you're not going to put something in your hand or forehead that looks too much like the book of Revelation. But we got a generation of seeker-sensitive preachers out there. They never preach on prophecy. They don't want to preach anything that seems negative. They're afraid of making their people afraid, so they won't tell them what I'm telling you. You got a generation that if they came up with a chip, they'd stick that thing in their hand, in their forehead, thinking it was the greatest thing in the world. And maybe that's why the Bible said, be careful, because in the last days, even the elect could be deceived. But I'm going to tell you one group that ain't going to put nothing in their hand or in their forehead. Leviticus 19:27 through 28. You shall not round the corners of your heads, neither shall you mar the corners of your beard. You'll not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you. It's called the Hasidic or the Orthodox Jews. There's 14 million Jews worldwide, 3.5 billion Jews in Israel, 25% are Orthodox. That means 850,000 Orthodox Jews live in Israel. There's going to be 144,000 sealed with the seal of God in the tribulation. They're going to have the Father's name in their forehead. And the reason that they are not going to follow the beast or the Antichrist, they're not going to put anything on their hand or in their head. And may the church, who knows the Word of God, be bold enough to say, we're thankful for the technology. Twitter, Facebook, satellite, webcasting. Oh, isn't it wonderful? But we'll tell you one thing. My head doesn't belong to Washington, D.C. My hand doesn't belong to Washington, D.C. I love the nation. I'm a citizen. I love it here. But my hands belong to the Lord God. My mind belongs to Christ. Hallelujah! And I'm going to keep my hand and my mind clear in these last days. Praise God, somebody. Woo-hoo. Woo. Be seated. Listen to this carefully. Just for a moment. Listen to this carefully. As an American, sometimes I have to separate the fact that I'm a Christian and I'm an American. Now, I'm a Christian living in America, but sometimes I got to speak as a Christian. Sometimes I have to speak as an American. You understand? So sometimes you stand up as an American. Number one, all believers need to stay informed. And you're going to get overload in this meeting. Now, there's good stuff to tell you, too. I'm going to show you something one day. We're going to be hopping, shouting all over this place you haven't seen. There's good things here. Number two, the church needs to stand together. It's not a black church and a white church and a Hispanic church. Honey, we're the church! Glory be to God. We're just the church. But the church has got to stick together. We can't be looking at race. We got to be looking at faith. Woo. Number three, now listen. Everybody unsaved needs to go ahead and get saved now. I'm serious. Because you need to start learning, and you need to start teaching others, and you need to start winning people. Don't wait, man. Don't wait till it's too late. Everybody raise your hands with me right now. God's in the house. Hallelujah. Woo! Would everybody begin to pray in your own way? Come on, everybody start just praying. Hallelujah. Father, we thank you right now in the name of Jesus for the anointing of God that's in this place. I thank you, God, in the name of Jesus for just insight that you help us. You said, God, there would be a generation that in the last days knowledge would be increased. We would not be ignorant. Paul said the day would not take us unaware. Now, Father, right now, I'm going to ask you in the name of Jesus to let the Holy Spirit go after every person who is awake. Now, here's what I want to do. When I ask you to, I'm going to have you stand. And then I'm going to ask you to turn to 4 people, left, right, front, behind. And I want you to say this to them. If Jesus were to come tonight, you know, one of these days it's going to happen just like that. One of these days a preacher will say that for the very last time. It'll happen. But if Jesus would come tonight, do you know you're ready? Now, if that person says, I know I'm ready, praise God with him, go to the next one. But anyone in this balcony and on this main floor that says, I'm really not right. As I've sat here, God is stirring me. I've saw something I didn't know. And you want prayer, you bring them right down here, and we're going to pray, and God's going to touch somebody before we ever walk out these doors.
You're going to hear a new, a unique, and I believe, accurate revelation explaining the mark of the beast. I can tell you, I have never heard this before. Hello, Sid Roth here. Welcome to my world, where it's naturally supernatural. There are such strange phenomena going on in a supernatural fashion around the world that I've asked my friend L.A. Marzulli, who has spent the last few years of his life documenting these things. I mean, most people read a little headline, but they don't understand how serious these things are and what they are what their signs are pointing to. For instance, have you noticed the increased number of earthquakes, tsunamis, these tragic events, strange weather patterns, sinkholes just mysteriously opening up. There have even been reports of sounds coming from the center of the earth. They're very eerie. UFO abductions, and they're being verified. Cattle mutilation, but it was supernatural, not just some crazy man doing it. Mystery codes being revealed in the scripture that's predicting the future. Mystery of the mark of the beast. L.A., I can see how God handpicked you to do this investigation, because you see, L.A. was raised Catholic and he was just disillusioned, and he had never seen the supernatural. So what happens? The first supernatural he sees, he thinks it's good, but it's not. It's demonic. He gets involved in the New Age, and he goes through a whole maze in that, and he gets pretty high up with a Maharaji, and he's in an ashram, and he's part of this Maharaji's orchestra, does a 10-city tour, and then the highlight, they come to the Houston Astrodome. And what was the purpose of them coming to the Astrodome?
It was a gathering of all the devotees of Maharaji into the Astrodome. Numbers were sort of, they expected tens of thousands of people. It wasn't the case. They probably had about 20,000 people. But the purpose was, it was called Millennium. And we were told that this was going to be a life-changing event. And it was life-changing for me only because I saw something while I was on that platform with the orchestra that night that sort of gave me a hint that maybe what I was looking at wasn't what I thought it was.
What did you actually see? Well, I mean, you weren't looking for this,
no.
But you had a revelation of there was something there beyond the people.
Mm-hmm. There was a large platform which was the stage, and behind the stage was a dais. And the Holy Family was perched on this dais with the guru on the very topmost part of the dais. And this was in an evening service, and the crowd was applauding and just, lots of energy from the crowd, and the orchestra played and got the crowd warmed up, and then the guru came out, had this big crown thing on. And I remember my friend nudging me like this and said, take a look behind you. And I glanced back like this. Now, here were the members of this so-called Holy Family, the mother, three brothers, and the guru on the highest part of this dais. And as I looked at them, I had no words to describe this, or no dialogue to articulate it as I'm doing so now. But they did not look entirely human. And what I mean by that, they were human, but there was a power that was emanating, coming through them. And I didn't ascertain, or couldn't ascertain at the time, whether the power was benevolent or malevolent. I just saw power, and it was overwhelming.
Okay, so he left that organization. He decided, enough with this craziness. I'm going to go into business. Things didn't work out too well. He gets a hold of a book. Tell me briefly about that book.
Well, it was sort of at the nadir of my journey and a spiritual walk, looking for something. And I was 30 years old, and I was reading a book by David Hunt called The Cult Explosion. And as I was reading that book, I was going, Silver Mind Control, been there, looked into that, all sorts of gurus, and I just went like a checklist going through each of those things. And at the back of the book, there's this little prayer. I'm alone in my room, there's nobody on television, exhorting me to accept Yeshua as Lord and Savior, none of that. And I just read this little prayer, and this was it. I just said, look, I don't know whether you're real or not, but if you are, come into my life. And I braced myself like this and kind of waited, looked around, nothing happened, of course.
I had that same experience, and here's what I thought. Well, I guess it didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work.
Maybe it worked for someone else, it didn't work for me. Right. But what happened?
Well, about a month later, I awakened from an extremely troubling dream. It shook me. The dream shook me to my core, and I woke up just bawling. And that was the beginning of sort of the taking me out of the kingdom of darkness, or that all the occult stuff I had been in, and moving me away from that into another dimension, or another paradigm, as it were.
And even though I thought, and L.A. thought, God didn't hear that prayer because we didn't feel anything, we didn't see anything, we didn't sense anything, God heard the prayer. And the same thing happened in my life. Literally, the Spirit of God flooded my room. and I have never, I don't understand a backslider. But what I believe, L.A., is that people that were involved in the dark side that then have a tremendous transforming experience, perhaps like Saul of Tarsus, who became Paul the Apostle, we have like a supernatural sense for the demonic, knowing whether something's demonic or something is of God. Are you finding this true in your life?
Absolutely. I mean, everything that I work on and all my research and investigative reporting, it all comes down to looking at what is happening. Let's say, for instance, there was something manifested. What I mean by manifested, appeared in Cairo about 2 years ago over a Coptic church. And what it was these light figures. The mayor was so overwhelmed by this thing that he made sure all the power to this town was completely cut out. But guess what? Even though there was no electric power, these entities, these light entities appeared over this Coptic church and did so for about 2 weeks. Thousands of people thronged to this area to look at the phenomena that was going on. But see, no one tested the spirits. No one, well, what is this thing? Everyone just assumed it was a benevolent apparition. Not so fast.
When we come back, I want L.A. to talk about these people that are being abducted by so-called flying saucers, and what does he think this power is? But the thing that is so amazing is they're putting implants in people, and he has actually talked to the doctor that has removed these implants, and he has amazing information. Don't go away. Hello, Sid Roth here with L.A. Marzulli, and L.A., I am so intrigued with these people that are being interviewed that say they've been abducted. Tell me about this doctor you spoke to, Dr. Lear, who started out as a skeptic of this whole phenomena. He's a surgeon.
Yes.
Tell me about him.
Well, Lear was asked by a friend to go in and look at this patient who claimed to have some sort of a implant or whatever, something under his skin. And first Lear just figured it was probably a wire or maybe a BB from childhood accident or something. But when he found out that the person was claiming to have been abducted by so-called aliens, he did an about-face and walked out of the room. Didn't want anything to do with this stuff. And in some ways, who could blame him? So he goes in reluctantly. He's sort of persuaded to come back and at least just look at the thing. Looks at the x-rays. Yes, there seems to be something there. So he decides to operate. He goes in. And to his absolute astonishment, what he discovers is a very small metallic implant. But over this implant, and this is obviously a magnification, I'll use my fist, is a secretion, a membrane of some sort. And he takes his scalpel and he tries to cut this membrane and he can't cut it. He then takes a forceps and goes in and yanks this thing out. And it comes out sometimes, he's done 16 of these things since, but it comes out sometimes in 2 or 3 pieces. What he's discovered is when you take these things out and you put them in a petri dish of the patient's blood, and you just let them, and the pieces are, let's say, separated by a half an inch or an inch. Come back 24, 48 hours later, the pieces have tried to assemble themselves. How is that possible? These implants are giving out a clock speed of a frequency, which we believe is a sawtooth, which means it's a computer wave. It's a clock speed at 300 gigahertz, which is 100 times faster than the fastest computer we have on the planet. Inside these things are carbon nanotubes not found in nature. And other compartments, we have no idea what they're doing. But I asked Lear, I said, in your professional opinion, what do you think this implant is? And in sort of a gruff, and I'll do my best imitation, he goes, well, it's changing the person's DNA. But that's what he believes. And that
Did you hear that? It's literally going to change a person's DNA. This sounds way beyond robots and way beyond any science fiction things I've ever seen. What is the source, in your opinion? Are there really flying saucers?
Well, there's 2 paradigms a person can embrace. One is the extraterrestrial hypothesis, that these are entities from the Pleiadian star system or Zeta Reticuli, or pick your poison, and they're coming here. They are our overlords. I call it the coming great deception, that they've decided to, that they created all life on this planet. They genetically manipulated early man. They started our civilizations. Now they're back at this critical juncture in human history to usher mankind into a time of peace, prosperity, and knowledge.
The science fiction people go that way.
Right. The New Ages go that way.
All right. What's your
I believe that they're interdimensional beings. They are highly malevolent. They are pernicious. They are evil. They have an agenda. It goes back to What we read in the book of Genesis, Genesis 6, the sons of God, the Benai Elohim, the fallen angels, saw the daughters of men, chose for them wives, and the hybrid was a Nephilim. Isn't it interesting that Yeshua says, as in the days of Noah, so it will be when the Son of Man returns? Why is he signaling the days of Noah to us? Why is he pointing to the days of Noah? Because something happened there that is unlike any other time in all of history, and that is the presence of the fallen angels openly presenting themselves on the earth, and I think we're moving into that time.
You've investigated, so I don't think there's ever been a time in planet Earth. There's been so many different supernatural phenomena, and most people have not seen the evil or the good, the God or the demonic. So they're setting themselves up for a big fall. L.A., another thing that intrigues me immensely is the discoveries of Torah codes. Explain briefly what that is.
Well, briefly, this is Torah Code 101. If you were to take the book of Genesis written in Hebrew and you were to do an equidistant letter sequence, and you can do this by hand, and you go every 50 letters, it will spell Torah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
You know, I interviewed a man that did Bible codes, and I said, show me, look my name up. And I was shocked. Do you know they not only found my name, the name of it supernatural, but they found the name of my wife, her middle name. She has a unique middle name. I've never even heard of anyone beyond her mother that had that name. It's thoroughly. I mean, that was in the Bible codes. I am not a skeptic of these things. They recently found President Obama in the Bible codes. What did they find?
Well, they did. If you go to Ezekiel 38, chapter 38.
Ezekiel 38?
Ezekiel 38,
Have you read the headlines lately? Iran and everything.
Absolutely, definitely. And I'd love to talk about that. But and you can do this without a computer. So you don't need a computer to do this. You can just go to Ezekiel 38. If you can read the Hebrew, it spells Obama.
In that passage of all the things that seem to be happening right now, President Obama's name was there? Tell me that
Well,
again.
that's incredibly bizarre. He's the president right now, obviously, and we see in front of us these nations. Remember, this prophecy has lain dormant, collecting dust for 2,600 years. And all of a sudden, in the age that we are in, we see Israel regathered back from the four corners of the earth, reestablished in its ancient homeland. They are truly a nation living without walls or gates, any of that stuff, and they're basically dwelling in safety.
You know what's so amazing is these Bible codes even have predicted the future, and they've come true. For instance, well, I'll tell you what, when we come back, we'll talk about it. Don't go away. Sid Roth here with L.A. Marzulli. And L.A., we're talking about the Bible codes, which are fascinating. But what if you took another large book, like, say, War and Peace, and looked for predictions in that using the Bible code? What would you find?
It doesn't work. Plain and simple. It just doesn't work. It's not even remotely the same.
But there are things of predicting the future. For instance, Prime Minister of Israel, Rabin. Tell me about that.
Well, there was a Bible code that was done with Yitzhak Rabin's name, and in a very, very tight grouping of letters. Yitzhak Rabin, assassin will assassinate. This was done a priori before the event.
That's very
pretty
specific.
Intense. Absolutely.
But it even gets wilder than that. Someone found it and went to the Israeli authorities, but obviously they didn't pay any attention. What about these? The Bible predicts there'll be strange signs in the skies. Tell me a few.
Well, certainly we're looking at objects around the sun that NASA seems to redact. Those images from the SOHO twin satellites, redact meaning they brushed them out several hours after researchers will look at them. Good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Tell me about the moon.
We looked at films from YouTubers all over the planet who were looking up at the moon, filming the moon and going, hey, I'm not an astronomer or anything, but I'm looking at this body, and it's not where it should be. It looks different. It looks weird. Well, if one person says that, you kind of dismiss it. But from all over the globe, people reporting the same phenomena. So we did some research on it, my partner and I, Richard Shaw. And what we discovered was a paper by an Italian scientist by the name of Lorenzo Iorio. And he wrote a paper called The Eccentricity of a Lunar Surface. He thinks that there's a large body coming into the solar system, which is perhaps making the moon act in an erratic way.
Well, there was actually a Torah code about the moon in a particular year. Explain that.
Well, the Torah code, which is really interesting, because when this was all happening, my partner Richard Shaw sent it to the rabbis, and so they did a Torah code, and it said, moon will be observed in the date, basically 2011. And anomalies in the lunar surface will be observed in 2011. So the Torah code sort of corroborated what we had been investigating, which I found absolutely fascinating.
He has an understanding of the mark of the beast I have never heard before, and it rings true. I think it's historic what you're going to share. Will you do that right now?
I'd love to. Thank you for allowing me to do this. We see in Matthew 24, Yeshua states something, as in the days of Noah, so it will be when the Son of Man returns. Alluded to that before. What differentiates those days are the presence of the fallen angels. But there's also some other dynamics in that passage which we overlook. One of them in particular is the length of lifespan. 5, 6, 7, 900 years old people lived, and I believe that's literal. They lived to 900 years or older, okay? Hold that thought, then jump over to the book of Revelation. It says, and we all get this one, that anyone who takes this mark will not be able to buy, sell, or trade. That's an easy one, right? But then we find out that anyone who takes this mark, whatever this thing is, grievous sores will appear over the body. Then we find out in the book of Revelation also, anyone who takes the mark is immediately thrown into the lake of fire. There's no grace, there's no mercy. It's just, you've got the mark, bam, you're in the lake of fire. Not my words, those are the words of Yeshua, and those are in the book of Revelation. A little further on we read something which is not necessarily tied into the mark of the beast, but here's the deal. It says that in those days, the days of the mark, men and women will seek death and not find it. How can that possibly be? I've held the chip from Dr. Lear in my hand. I've asked him point blank, what is this thing doing? It's changing the DNA. This thing, and this is how they're going to do it.
This is the chip that people that go into flying saucers have the surgery.
These are the prototypes.
By the way, did this doctor find that these people were loonies?
No, not at all. All these people that have been abducted, most of them, I would say well over 90%, do not want any notoriety. In fact, they seek anonymity. They're not interested in any type of publicity. They just want the thing out.
Why doesn't the U.S. reveal all the information they have on flying saucers? Other nations have done it.
Well, the other nations have done it. Greece, the United Kingdom, France, Belgium, Germany, Japan, Mexico, Brazil. They've all released, I should say, what were at one time top secret documents. We don't do it, and I think the reason is simply this. They fear some sort of a backlash, religious backlash. What happens if people all of a sudden find out that maybe the God we've all believed in isn't? This is what I call, said, the coming great deception. And I believe it's been orchestrated for thousands of years.
Let's go back to this changing the DNA.
Okay.
Why would someone want a chip inside of them?
Here's the scenario. Let's say there's a war, upcoming war in the Middle East, and we see some sort of a nuclear holocaust. Remember, this is just a scenario, okay? So we see a nuclear event in the Middle East, perhaps in this country, and all of a sudden, mile-wide UFOs begin to manifest, begin to appear all over this planet. How is that going to affect everyone? But they'll come with two things. They'll come with a free energy source, and they will come with a chip, and this goes right back into what Matthew 24 states. They will come with this implant, which when you take it, will bring you into, as a member of the New World Order, okay? And when they scan this thing, not only will have its medical records, but it will change and correct your DNA. That's what we'll be told.
So in other words, you'll live longer, I guess.
You'll live to 500 years disease-free. All this.
So who's going to say no? Only someone that knows the Lord.
Exactly.
Only. And you can see why they'd be enemies of the world.
We'd be looked at as Neanderthals. How can you possibly believe in this ridiculous mythos of a Judeo-Christian God? Why not just take this mark and live disease-free for 500 years? It sounds like a great deal. And I've held it in my hand, and this is what I think is coming, and it's the only thing which fulfills all that criteria which we just spoke about that's found in the book of Revelation.
And as far as timing, isn't it interesting in this whole scenario of what we see shaping up right now of the nations coming against Israel is on the horizon with Obama's name in the secret code? It shows you how soon it'll be that the Messiah is going to return. Tell me about the rapture vision you had, real brief, because there is a blessed hope.
I didn't seek this. I didn't in any way. I was getting ready to go in the shower, so unlike our last guest, I didn't fast or pray or any of that stuff. I was just getting ready to go in the shower. I was not in the body or out of the body. I can't tell you, just like Paul says. All I know, I was snatched up. I found myself in the heavenly scene. I was there for 3 seconds. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Bam, back again. Second one, I look around and I can see that we're not sandwiched in like sardines, that there's 20 to 30 feet between myself and other people. We are all looking in the same direction. That's second one. Second two, there is a holy, reverential silence which permeates the entire scene. You can hear a pin drop. No one's asking, gee, where are we? There's none of that. Everyone knows exactly what's happened. It's a holy, I can't even describe it. The best words I can, holy, reverential silence. The stillness is unbelievable. Second three, I realized to my utter amazement that my sin nature, and what I mean by that is all the little nasty stuff that we do that crops up even though we don't want it to. It just crops up and sort of eats at us. Our anger, our bitterness, whatever it is. All that was gone. And I was liberated. That's in 3 seconds, and then bam, I was back and I wept.
Well, let me tell you something. This has never happened to me before, but a few days before this interview, I woke up from a dream, and this is what I was saying in the dream. Jesus is coming soon. Jesus, I said it 3 times. Jesus is coming soon. I say to you, Jesus is coming soon. Are you ready?
An increase in wars and rumors of wars, mass flooding, spontaneous outbursts of Arab unrest, increase of earthquakes, tsunamis and volcano activity, unexplained sinkholes, massive spontaneous bird and fish deaths, increased sightings of UFOs, claims of alien abductions, Torah code prophecies that predict what's happening in the news today. Are all these a wake-up call from God warning us of the events about to take place on planet Earth?